Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 152 of the It's the Pictures podcast. My name is John Gilpatrick, and joining me, as always, is
Max Colville.
How you doing today, Max?
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
You've been enjoying the summer, I guess, or whatever there is of it. Did you get a big blast of smoke from Canada last week?
Oh boy, did we? Yes.
Yeah, so did we. It was a scene for sure here.
Yeah, it was like good thing if you had spare N95s. It's a good thing you had them.
Yeah, we did. I didn't go out of the house for like 3 days. It felt like, but so that was a delight. I just got back from vacation, so we are, a little bit longer than usual between episodes. But we thought of something kind of out there and a little bit, I don't know, unusual for us. Normally, we're like connecting movies that are coming out to, other movies that we wanted to discuss, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to connect music to movies we want to talk about, and specifically, we both saw the Taylor Swift Eras Tour relatively recently, and we are going to, I guess, concoct our own sort of Eras Tour with movies that we associate with each of the Taylor Swift albums.
For the most part.
Sort of. Maybe with songs or vibes or whatever, but we're going to run through Taylor Swift, her career by movies that we think are appropriate for different points in it. And we'll pause and talk a little bit about the show that we saw. You saw it at Gillette, right? And I was down in Philly at Lincoln Financial. And I don't know. It'll be different, but I think it'll be fun. I certainly came out of that. Well, I mean, I'll get into it a little bit later. But yeah, so we're going to do that today. We'll talk about some new releases, maybe some Spider-Verse, maybe a brief update on our box office game now. Now that I'm swimming in cash.
Did you add up your totals yet? Most of your movies have come out, right?
What's that?
A lot of your movies have come out already.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had Guardians 3. I have Spider-Verse. I don't even remember.
Fast X, I think.
Did I have Fast? And you have Mission Impossible, though.
Right.
I don't remember where Barbie and Oppenheimer broke down, but there's still more to come. It's not like it's over. Like, there have been years before where the Marvel movie did so well that, like, it was over after, like, a week. But I don't think we're necessarily there yet, but I definitely got good value on Spider-Verse.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that. And before that, you shared a news article, which really, I guess, all credit to the writer who put it together for Paste, but is kind of a variation of a conversation we had 2 months ago when Super Mario Brothers came out, right? Which is kind of like, if you think it's bad now, just wait when it comes to Hollywood and its love affair with IP.
Right, and that's why I wanted to share with you, because I was like, oh, look at this. This is just like emphasizing John's points.
Yeah, it is. I like, the sad thing is that it just sort of feels like, not that I'm like tooting my own horn, but like this was something that like you could kind of see coming, and I felt like maybe people were like swept up in like MCU love when we were still doing Avengers, pre-Phase 4 content and so on, and it just felt like, we thought like, yeah, this is a lot, but there's still time, and like there really that was the time to like, I don't know what you do about this, but to do something to stop seeing those movies, I'm not sure, and it feels like, yeah, we're at the point now where it's just like nobody cares, because I mean the fact is that they are just catering to what people want. Like, I don't think this is certainly like is a business problem, and like businesses are just exceedingly greedy and kind of not giving original movies a chance. But that's partially because people don't care about that stuff anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I did an extension, John, of our box office game on the newsletter, and like I was just pointing out like how many sequels were on the list, and how like some of these films that or coming out this summer were like the 9th and 10th entries of their respective franchises, and it's just like nothing is original anymore.
I mean, they're even giving sequels to like The Meg, right? Which was just like a shark movie that like I didn't even know like anybody saw. And I don't even know. It's just sort of like, well, that was a movie. Like, let's give it a sequel. And it's just cheap, I guess, you know. So that's kind of like where we're at. I mean, I was especially dejected around Super Mario Brothers because that felt like a new phase of this all, which is kind of like, okay, like let's just make brands movies, and like we saw like, you know, smaller movies that like people seem to enjoy, like to give them credit, like Nike was a movie this year, and Tetris was a movie this year, and BlackBerry was a movie this year, and it's just like it literally is just brands are now movies, and even like the ones that people like, it's because they're taking the place of something that actually was original. This movie cites Michael Clayton, or this article rather, as something that just like, you know, is long gone now. And I think that's true. But like the movies that, you know, would have been original and interesting and whatnot are now kind of just like branded also. And there's no sense of like,
yeah, right. Like,
well, I mean, this is really the main point of the article is like, you know, making $100 million is not worth the trouble. It has to make $1 billion.
Right. Yeah, and I think last episode I talked to our guest Megan Kearns about like some of those movies and like how I really liked BlackBerry, and like to your point, right? It's just another one based on a popular IP that people already know about.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I always kind of wonder about is I haven't seen that. I know a lot of people really liked it, and I don't want to like, you know, poo-poo that in any sort of way, but I do sort of wonder like if that movie came out 15 years ago, would people have responded to it, or is it because it's just like the closest approximation we have to something that just doesn't really exist anymore? And I think that same way about like a lot of romantic comedies. I mean, they don't really make romantic comedies anymore, but like when they do, it feels like everybody kind of is like, oh, this is so great, I love it. And it's like really not that good of a romantic comedy. It's just that like we're so starved for stuff like that like we kind of lift it up and want to champion it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
I saw that like Julia Roberts and George Clooney movie where they go to Bali or whatever, and I was like, objectively, this is like not a good movie, but I was like dying to see it, and I was championing it because it's like, yeah, cool. I'm glad they made this movie. Like
Ticket to Paradise, is that it?
Yeah. But yeah,
I think Jennifer Lawrence has
rare events these days.
Jennifer Lawrence has one of those coming out.
Yeah, I just saw some articles about that today about her co-star who turned down going to Harvard this year so he could star in this movie, where Jennifer Lawrence is trying to seduce him. I suppose he'll enjoy his next year at Harvard quite well. But yeah, I don't know. Anything else on this topic, or is it just something we're going to need to live with and observe as time moves on?
Yeah, I think like the thing that kills me the most is that Nintendo seems to be happy with the Illumination deal, and if we do get a Zelda movie, it will probably be like in the same kind of format as Mario, and that's just a very sad thing to think about.
I mean, almost unquestionably. I mean, people are joking that Chris Pratt is going to voice Link too, because why not? He must voice on them all.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I saw that like they said his last 3 movies have grossed a combined $3 billion worldwide, and that includes Jurassic World Dominion, which I'm just like, I legitimately don't even remember that existing.
Yeah,
that's sort of like that's sort of it, right? These movies are meant to just like come out and be entirely disposable and make some people a ton of money, and then we all just like forget and move on to whatever the next stupid thing is that can keep us distracted.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's how it is.
So, on a happier note, let's talk about Taylor Swift. How did you enjoy
Okay,
the
so
concert?
yeah. Oh, I thought it was great. It was a little long to tell you the truth.
It was really long.
I I was like, yes, Taylor Swift concert. I want to see this. And then it was like 2 hours and 50 minutes into it, and I'm like, she can't have that many songs left, can she?
Yeah. It's a lot of songs. It's a long concert. Um, as somebody who like going into it would not have considered myself much of a Taylor Swift fan, uh, it was a grind, let's say, but overall, it was still really fun, and I enjoyed being there. And I've definitely been like listening to a lot more of her music since the concert. I really just went because my wife wanted a plus one, and she's a big fan. I know you were a fan before all this,
Yeah.
and your wife as well. So it was a little bit of a different experience among the two of us, but I would say I definitely appreciate her music more, having seen some of it live and the show that she put on, and have been listening to it a lot, and kind of made me think of this podcast idea, which I thought would be sort of fun.
John, do you think of yourself as Paul Schrader in this situation, thinking like she is a genius?
I don't know that I would want to associate myself with Paul Schrader really at all in any sort of fashion outside of he makes some interesting movies. I did not know he said that, but I suppose he's correct there.
Yes, he's a huge Taylor Swift fan, I think.
Okay, well that's really interesting,
Yeah.
considering a lot of his other opinions. Um, but yeah, I sure okay. He broken clocks, right?
Yes.
um, but yeah, no, I mean, it really is impressive. It's an impressive show. It's impressive. I saw after the first few shows she did in Arizona, JJ Watt was there, the football player for, I guess, used to play for the Cardinals. And he was just like, this is the most impressive, like, physical feat I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue. I mean, it's grueling. Now, I was at the show that sort of like in Philly that became, I guess, a little bit famous after the fact for she like had to verbally get into it with a overly aggressive security guard, which I don't know if you saw that, but that was a little bit of a scene. And I didn't know really what was happening at the time, but we got to kind of learn more about that after the fact. And I don't know. I mean, as a fan going in, did you have any like moments throughout the show that you especially enjoyed?
Um, I don't know. Like, I'm big into um the Speak Now era, if you will, and
Okay.
unfortunately, she only picked like one song from
I
there,
know.
Enchanted.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a terrific set. And like some of the songs that maybe I don't necessarily love, they had like really good. She had really good production for them,
Yeah.
and made it more interesting.
Yeah. No, the production was really cool throughout. Um, so yeah, no, that's good. Now as we get into some of these movies, did you have like a way you went about thinking about this?
Yeah, yes and no. I kind of like some of them. I thought like of songs specifically on the album that like if there was a movie that made me think of a certain song or vice versa, or just trying to make some kind of connection that would be fun.
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I mean, sometimes it was just a song, sometimes it was like a song that I really liked. Other times it was trying to think about like the story of the album, or in some cases, like a little bit about like, the inspiration for it, which in a lot of cases is a relationship, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's other things. So at least from what my wife tells me, she helped me with this quite a bit. I told her like some of the movies I was thinking about originally, and she just kind of shut some of them down. She's like, no, that's a bad correlation. Like you need to think more like this. It's like, okay, got it.
Oh, this would be
So
fun. So she had input on the list.
she did. She had some. There were some that I put my foot down for, but others where I kind of took her notes to heart and rethought it. But I feel like I'm pretty happy with where I got to on pretty much all of these. So, should we start?
Sure.
Okay, so now I don't know if what the secret songs were at your concert, but assuming that one of them wasn't from her debut album, self-titled, that otherwise there were no songs from Taylor Swift at the show.
I think like she played one of the songs from it, which, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't really like the first album all too much.
Yeah, I'm not a country music person myself.
Right. And so, like, I think she played this song called, like, Should Have Said No or something like that.
Oh, okay. I think I think I've heard that with like a country thing behind it.
Yeah, like, I think that's on the first album. And, like, I didn't really think too much of the first album. So,
yeah, fair enough. Did you make a connection or no?
No, I skipped that one.
That's fair because she did too. I had a kind of a loose one, which was more vibesy, but I put down the Princess Diaries just because I felt like it was like very young and kind of aspirational, and kind of concerned with younger people things. Not that like, I guess the state that Anne Hathaway is taking sovereign control of isn't a big deal in that movie, but I do feel like it has like a young person sensibility. And I know like my sister loved that movie when she was in like, middle school or something, which is probably how old Taylor Swift was when she wrote her first album. So I had that, but I didn't feel like extremely strongly about that because it was the only album that I really don't know much about.
Yeah. So do you like Princess Diaries? I've never actually seen that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it since I was, around the age when it came out. And again, it was like really more just it's on at my house because my sister wants to watch it again. I wouldn't say that I have like super fond memories of it, but I will say that like, it was Anne Hathaway's big breakout and I enjoy her as an actress. So I'll give it some kudos for that. And Julie Andrews is always a delightful screen presence and we don't get much of her nowadays. So yeah, like can't say that much about it, but it's a movie that I feel like people of a certain age have a nostalgic appreciation for, and I'm sure that that's appropriate, and it's probably appropriate for the connection to Taylor Swift's first album, which maybe doesn't have the production values and deeper themes of some of the later albums, but is still fun for people who listened to it at the time it came out.
All right. Yeah, so Fearless has a lot more songs that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
So I that was definitely something I was looking forward to making a connection on. And for me on Fearless, I kind of thought to that like really first love, early love type of stuff, and the movie that really, because of Love Story and 15 on the album. And so like I thought of like the romance in Princess Bride and thought like that would be like a really fun movie to go with the joys of Fearless.
I think that makes sense, and we're deeply in princess land here with the first two movies we talked about, which feels appropriate. Did you were there any moments from the concert from Fearless that you really liked? I mean, she did kind of like 3 or 4 like of the big hits like early on in the show.
Yeah, Love Story is like the one that really I was looking forward to hearing, and the crowd lit up when she played that one. So
yeah, for sure. We had one of our acoustic songs was Forever and Always from that album, which everybody in the crowd seemed to really enjoy. I guess she sang it in honor of Lena Dunham, who was in the audience that day, and it was her birthday, and she requested it according to what she said on the stage at that moment. So that was a fun moment. I ended up going with 10 Things I Hate About You, which I actually just watched. It's the only movie that I've watched recently that I'm going to talk about here. And I hadn't seen it in a really long time. It was really fun to revisit. Are you a fan of 10 Things I Hate About You?
I am.
We probably talked about it when we did our 1999 episode.
Yeah.
Like a series of episodes.
It wasn't like a movie that I saw when it came out. It was much, much later.
Yeah.
But then when I saw it, I could appreciate Heath Ledger and like Julia Stiles' performances in it.
Yeah. So I thought about this. Really, like Fearless kind of is at least the most popular songs off Fearless are like kind of classic rom-com-y tropes in a lot of ways, and so I really wanted to just go with like a standard like rom-com that everybody loves because this was such a popular album. And Love Story, probably the biggest song, has the Romeo and Juliet line. So I was thinking about Shakespeare, and 10 Things I Hate About You obviously is a modern reinterpretation of The Taming of the Shrew, old Shakespeare play. So that's kind of the direction I wanted to go in, all about young love and so on and so forth. So it's a fun movie. I don't know if it's the best connection to that material. You could maybe just say Romeo and Juliet
yeah,
if you
sure.
really want it to be obvious. But this was, I think that
we could go Romeo plus Juliet and do the Baz Luhrmann.
Obviously. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about Baz Luhrmann a little bit later on. But I think that 10 Things I Hate About You probably has more of a the setting is more appropriate and the tone is more appropriate than Romeo and Juliet. So then that takes us up to Speak Now, which, as you mentioned, is I don't want to put words in your mouth if it's your favorite album, but it's at least one that you think of very fondly and maybe was a door or a step through the door for you as a Taylor Swift fan.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I first started listening to Taylor Swift, it was after the Grammy Awards and how she performed Mean on the stage.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh, this was a great performance. And even though I don't like country music, she has a lot of talent, and I thought the song was really catchy, so I started listening to her music at that point before Red even came out. I think top to bottom, I really like the album. Like I said already, Mean and Mine, Enchanted. There's a lot of fantastic songs on that album. I think, is that the one with Sparks Fly too?
Yeah, that's Caitlin's favorite.
Yeah.
And the Enchanted was the only one that she played live, but I guess she's got like her re-record of this album coming out in July, so I don't know if there's going to be more coming after that or if it's just kind of meant for the acoustics. But I know she was disappointed that there wasn't more Speak Now at the show, and I think probably a lot of fans were. But there's plenty of songs that you got still, so right. I guess that's just the way it goes. So for me, I thought about, this was a little bit hard for me, just because I wasn't as familiar with the whole album besides like some of the bigger songs. Back to December is another one, which was kind of got a lot of play on the radio back in the day. And kind of thinking about it as a little bit of a coming of age, kind of story of a lot of the songs. And Mean, I think, fits that. Certainly Dear John fits that, which was, sort of one of the bigger songs, I think, in terms of her telling the story of various famous men. So I thought about a coming of age story and ended up going with The Graduate, which I think is kind of like an interesting fit, even though it's obviously from a male perspective. But you think about kind of a illicit romance like you get with Dear John. And she even said, I guess, Caitlin was reading me some of the album notes, and she said the title of the album, Speak Now, comes from the Speak Now and Forever Hold Your Peace. And kind of that being an interesting, she talks about how like in movies that happens all the time, but nobody ever does that in real life. And I thought about the wedding scene at the end of The Graduate where Dustin Hoffman is kind of doing just that, and he shows up and crashes the wedding and is banging on the glass and trying to stop it. So I thought there was a few kind of interesting connections there, and the just general theme of somebody who's trying to find their place in the adult world, and maybe that was a fitting nod to this album.
Yeah, I don't think like for this choice I felt that deeply about it. I was thinking maybe like a romance movie that I really felt strongly about, and just that experience of having a magical encounter. And for me, that really brought to mind Before Sunrise.
Oh yeah. So I had as a placeholder before I got to The Graduate, I had Before Sunset as a choice.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those movies, Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy, they just are wonderful movies, and there's not much action to them if you're not familiar with the Before trilogy, and um, it's really about a day in the life of these two characters and how they grow, and this kind of romance where they leave it up to fate whether or not they'll actually meet again, and it's just lovely movies. I think for me, when the third movie came out, I was a little sad that it wasn't as like fantasy based, because like it brought in like, oh well, hello, we're in real world
Yeah,
issues.
life is shitty
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. And I liked the fantasy maybe more of the first two, but yeah. Definitely the Before trilogy is worth checking out if you haven't.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about that. So good choice and similar vibes for us there. And that takes us to Red, which was, I guess you could probably fairly say, like the first album that really, I would say, is more pop than country, even though I feel like this album and the two that come before it are pretty well mixed between the two, but this one feels like it's crossed over further into pop and a little bit more away from country. And was a big album, has a lot of like really famous hits on it now, and We Are Never Getting Back Together, and I Knew You Were Trouble. All Too Well is, of course, like sort of the big famous song.
Well, now it's newly famous
Yeah,
again.
yeah, redone now as a 10-minute long version with a movie short film attached, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I went with like the deep heartbreak of All Too Well, and I couldn't resist going a little on the nose, and I did Brokeback Mountain, and all I'll say is just Jake Gyllenhaal leaves emotional wreckage everywhere.
That's funny because I also picked the Jake Gyllenhaal movie. This one, if you want to see him as an idiot, you can watch Okja, which is a bizarre performance from him in that movie, and
Yeah, that was crazy.
um, that could be a nice mix with All Too Well.
Fair enough. Was there anything else about that movie that sort of spoke to you, or no? Just there's Jake and he's crazy.
Yeah, mostly I wanted to find a Jake movie that like
It
I
felt
had
like you had
seen.
to, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, I definitely think we should talk a little bit more about Red.
Okay, tell me, yeah, because you have more of a connection. So tell me, what is it that makes Red such like a critical album in this albumography or whatever you call it?
And yeah, it's funny. Like, I wasn't really like jumping at the bit to like buy like the Taylor's version re-records of it, and some part of me with the whole Taylor's version series. And if people don't know, I'll share this because this is important with Taylor Swift's career, is that she doesn't own the rights to some of her earlier albums. They were sold underneath her, and in order to get the profit from those albums, she has re-recorded them because she was the lead songwriter on all those songs, so she can make her own variations of them and sell them. And the hope is that by releasing these new versions, she kind of makes the old versions obsolete and makes
Mm-hmm.
them like kind of like valueless, and she
Mm-hmm.
can maybe buy them back herself. Pennies on the dollar someday. Um, and so like I wasn't sure because like certainly when you record an album, it's, and even when you make a movie, it's all about like where you are mentally at that time, and how you sound and stuff like that. And I think my favorite part of the re-recordings is like the vault material, and of course this one did have All Too Well, the 10-minute version, and it's nice to hear the extended version that she had in mind. But I think like for me, I like just the crescendo of the original version a
Yeah,
little bit. I think it is perfectly perfect the way it was,
yeah.
and like maybe the 10-minute version is more of a novelty. Um, but
She does all 10 minutes at the show.
She does, and
Wow.
I think I've read lists of like her like I think Rolling Stone or something like ranking all her songs ever, and like they're
Jesus.
like, oh yeah, All Too Well 10-minute version is like one of her opuses, and like I'm like, okay,
it definitely is an opus in the sense that like a song can be an opus because it's long enough to be. I guess, I don't know. Like you said, is it bloated or is the original tighter, or is this more detail crucial? I think it's a good song either way. I think both work, and it's a good moment in the show for sure. She played a lot of songs from Red, it felt like, and I don't know, maybe that was just like the moment in the show where I was starting to feel a little antsy, so it felt longer, but it felt like she gave that album a lot of time, and so maybe appropriately so, based off of kind of the way you're describing it to me.
Yeah, I guess if I had to rank these albums, I'll get to it later, but
Okay.
Red would probably be upper tier.
Okay, cool. After Red is 1989, which if Red had a lot of hits, I feel like 1989 like, kind of stepped on it, because this song is just like radio hit after radio hit, and it is like a fully pop album now. We are kind of not anywhere close to a country style, and Blank Space and Bad Blood and Shake It Off. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but this was for sure another section of the show that was quite long. But just so many songs that, even somebody like me knows most of the words to, just because they were so present on the radio in the mid 2010s. So I teased it a little bit earlier in terms of, you mentioned Romeo plus Juliet. And I said, maybe I'll talk about Baz Luhrmann later. And this is the part where I'm going to mention his adaptation of The Great Gatsby. Just feels like this album kind of is like, she was country and now she's in the big city, and she's living large. And I guess Caitlin told me that she references, I think on the next album, something about, last year I was living Gatsby. So that felt appropriate also. I don't know. I guess this was more of a vibes thing than anything else. I didn't have a specific, besides that, I don't have a specific song tie-in. But to me, that kind of sums up this one well, which is, it's like, you're having a party, and you're listening to these hits and you are not twanging anymore.
Yeah, for me, it was like probably because I had just come out and saw it, but like when I was putting this list together, I was like, oh yeah, like let's pick out a movie that came out in 1989.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea.
And for me, I was like, oh well, The Little Mermaid live action just came out, and so like you can watch the original Little Mermaid, or you can watch the new live action if you want. And yeah, I imagine that was probably a movie Taylor Swift eventually came to love herself, and
you would think.
Yeah. I obviously the movie itself did okay domestically, and there was plenty of people who went out and wanted to see it, but yeah, I figured we hadn't talked too much about it, and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting choice. I like the idea of going with something from 1989. I guess what won the Oscar that year, I think, was Driving Miss Daisy. Probably not super appropriate choice. I'm very curious, like, if, in this equation, who would be the Ursula to presumably Taylor's Ariel?
Well, for a long time, it probably would have been like Katy Perry, but they made it up.
Okay. Yeah. I think I know a little bit about that. And then Prince Eric in this case is Harry Styles.
During that era, I don't, maybe.
Or is it Joe Jonas? I don't know. Oh, Calvin Harris, I think, is a thing. I don't know. I don't remember the chronology of men, but yeah, one of them probably. So okay, cool. That's That's 1989. Do you have any 1989 like memories or highlights for you, song wise or
No,
performance wise?
I think it's funny. Like I thought I used to like love this album and think it was one of the best, but like upon reflecting on it, I'm like maybe it's not as like memorable as I thought it was.
It's
Uh,
really hard, I feel like, to get hyped for hearing some of these songs. Like, for me, there was novelty to like almost all of these albums because it really just like wasn't something that I sought out. I like you hear some of it because it's hard to not go places sometimes and hear Taylor Swift songs. But I felt like 1989 was the only one that like it just felt like, okay, like yeah, I know all this stuff. It's like not really getting me jazzed in the way that like even some of the older songs with a little bit more of a country bend to it, and certainly a lot of the later ones, kind of just intrigued me for being sort of new, I guess.
yeah, it's funny. I for a lot of times I like to make up my own lyrics to songs and bother Shannon.
Okay.
And obviously this is not something that I'm alone in because I've seen T-shirts made, but like thinking that she says Starbucks lovers and blank space. So
Yeah, I've heard that before too. I will say, Caitlin has her ranking of the Taylor Swift songs, and her favorite Taylor Swift song is off this album, which is "Out of the Woods," which did not get played at the concert. Okay, so after that, we had just a total change of personality, reputation. There's lots of snakes. We're, I think, hiatusing from social media. There's controversy, et cetera, right?
yes,
Uh,
she was not happy with what was going on.
sure, yes. And I think history has definitely been on her side. When it comes to some of the things that were happening there. But nevertheless, I think an album that people maybe didn't get and didn't appreciate, maybe they do now. I know, again, like I have one frame of reference for this, and it's my wife, and she very much likes Reputation, even though she didn't at the time when it came out. It's darker, and musically, it's very electronic, and I mean, it's pop still, but it's even like progressing past that, I think, in some areas. I went with Gone Girl for this one, which I felt like thematically kind of made sense. She talks a lot about, what's happened to old Taylor. Oh, she's dead. And a lot of imagery about, sort of her older personas, kind of like, I don't know if getting killed is the right word, but trying to like put them to bed. And I just like the music kind of in some ways reminded me a little bit of the score in Gone Girl, the like Trent Reznor score. Just I think that like there was something to the way that the actress is escaping me, Rosamund Pike, her kind of character carries herself that like made me think of Taylor Swift a little bit, not in the darker elements, obviously, with the killing and the, just general psychopathy. But just this idea that, like, she talks very eloquently about, like, needing to be someone else and the cool girl speech and all that. And it just felt like there's probably something to that. When you're that famous and you need to be, you maybe can't totally be yourself. So I found that to be like kind of a loose connective thread as well. So that was kind of my choice. I really like Gone Girl too. It's a movie that, holds up really well. I haven't seen it in probably a few years, but I remember revisiting it maybe during the COVID, early COVID period, and just still finding it to be very engrossing.
Yeah, I was also looking at the different songs of this, and like it's hard to like look at like Ready for It and not think about football. And for a long time, I was like, oh, is there like a football movie I can go with this? And then I was like, no, let me look at something like Look What You Made Me Do.
Yeah.
And I thought like the perfect movie for that is Kill Bill.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, how Uma Thurman is pretty much left for dead, and she comes back, and now she's gonna take her revenge on all these people. And she didn't really have to sign up for this. She didn't go on this killing rampage, but they kind of forced her hand, and so she goes back and mutilates these people. As far as like the crazy 88s, they get destroyed.
Yeah, for sure. And the 5-point palm exploding heart trick.
Yeah.
No, that's a good one. I think we were obviously on a similar wavelength there, but I like your choice as well.
Yeah, and as like I don't really like Reputation as an album.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. That's the impression I got from you.
I think like I really like Delicate, like it's one of my favorite songs off the album, and that it seems like kind of off center from what the rest of the album is kind of like. So
yeah, I think that's fair. I like Getaway Car quite a bit.
Yeah, it was funny. Did you see people writing on their cars at your concert, Getaway Car?
No, I did not.
Yeah, I saw quite a few at Gillette.
I didn't get a chance to ask you yet, but did you dress up in costume?
Oh no, I didn't.
Did Shannon?
Shannon bought a T-shirt offline before we went to. I was like, Shannon, why not glitter or white boots or something? She's like, no, I'm gonna do a T-shirt, and then eventually, after fighting the crowds, we got some merch, and we wore that during the show.
Perfect. All right, so that's Reputation. Next up, we had a couple years off, and we get to Lover, which came out in, I believe, 2019. Is that right?
Maybe.
I think so. It's why it never got toured properly, because it was COVID the next year. And this was I guess you could say this is like at least the first Joe Alwyn album. Well, TBD on that. I think it has a lot of fun songs. Cruel Summer is great. This was the one that opens the concert. This is the opening era, I guess, which is kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah, no, I think she was also feeling like she couldn't tour and like fans were waiting for it. So she was.
I think that's exactly what it was. It was like, this is picking up where we left off. But yeah, so I ended up going with, for this one, La La Land, the musical with Ryan Gosling, who is a musician, and Emma Stone, who is an actor. Obviously, you can gender flip those in real life, and you have an actor and a musician romance. I really kind of thought of this album a little bit like as a sequel to Speak Now. I don't know if that's something that anybody else thinks, but just listening to some of the songs, like I talked about Speak Now as a coming of age album, and I felt like Lover is sort of an of age album, and it's kind of like what happened after you come of age, and you're still kind of dealing with some of the same things, but just like from a more adult perspective. And I feel like that's kind of like what La La Land is about. It's like these people kind of know who they are already. They're just trying to figure out their way. And you have songs that are a little bit more, they're just a little bit different, like The Man, and that's like about, like I have this stuff, but there's still obstacles and challenges and things that kind of piss me off and annoy me. And then there's still romance too, but they're like a little bit more mature type songs. Not so like straightforwardly about like, heartbreak and stuff. So I found that kind of interesting. Real life wise, you could say the parallel is that, in this movie, these two people are in a great relationship and they're bringing out a lot of great things in each other, but circumstances just, kind of get in the way and they don't end up together. And maybe that's fine. And that's sort of where we are in real life with these two individuals as of a couple months ago. So I thought that was kind of an interesting connection as well. And really the first thing that drew me to La La Land was just the imagery of the album cover, which is like a lot of like swirling kind of colors. And I thought about like the sunsets and how like fierce they are in La La Land, and thought that was kind of another connection.
Yeah, I could see that. I just remember Lover leaving a really bad taste in my mouth when it first came out, because she came out with that like Brandon Urie song, which was me, and just like, that is such an awful song.
Everybody hates that song, I think. Yeah,
and I think I don't know. I'd have to look up the original track listing of Lover, but like I thought like Me was originally like higher on the album. Like maybe she like dumped it towards the end of the album now, since like
It's toward the bottom on Spotify.
yeah. It's just like that kind of upset me. And then like I think she also did that other song, which is known for like her like Katy Perry Forgiveness song. And
which one's that?
I don't know, the one that had the music video where she came out in like support of Pride and
oh,
the
that's
LGBT.
probably the one that Shade never made anybody less gay.
Yeah, I think so. I think
you need to calm down.
Yeah, I think like that one is a fine song, but yeah, Lover, the song itself from the album, is probably one of the stronger pieces. And
okay, I think that one's fine. I was like, if you're trying to make this 45 song set list a little bit more manageable for people, like that's the Lover song that I felt like you could probably cut, just because it doesn't. I don't know. It's a good song. I like listening to it. It's just that it didn't need to hear it like live in the stadium.
No, I can see that.
Yeah.
One song she did play live in the show was "The Man."
Yeah,
and she had a big like office set for, and I used that as my launching point for my choice of movie, and felt like I picked like women who were empowered by their knowledge and their strengths, and but they were always put down because of the men in their lives. And I thought Hidden Figures was a perfect movie for that type of feeling. Certainly the women in that movie are very capable, and if they were men, and apparently also another theme in that movie is if they were white, they would certainly be taken more seriously than they are in that movie.
They wouldn't have to go to the bathroom like a half mile away.
You're right.
Yeah, no, that's a good choice for that song for sure. That was in the show, like kind of the first like big set piece moment, it felt like. And it was kind of like, oh wow, this is like pretty wild. I don't go to a lot of concerts, so it's like I really don't. Like the last concert I was at was like 10 years ago, so like I don't have much of a baseline for shows in general.
You should watch the Reputation tour on Netflix if you
haven't seen it. I probably should. Did you go to that?
No, Shannon did, and she said it was like amazing.
Okay, yeah, cool.
And I've watched the Netflix concert and thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I should definitely watch that. But yeah, no, I think that's a good choice. So now we're in the pandemic and we're getting 2 albums in the same year, and they're radically different than anything that came before it, right? In Folklore and Evermore. Are these folk albums?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. I don't know my music terminology like feels like they're folk albums, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's not a
really a word to
really winning.
Otherwise.
There's not like a winning pop song on them. Like she like released like Cardigan as like the lead single.
Oh, okay.
And like that is not like a big pop song.
No, I wouldn't say so. I really like these albums. You know, it's a little bit more my like the type of music that I gravitate towards, so I listen to these a lot. What's your general take?
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I like when artists kind of explore
Me too.
Genres that they're not known for. One of my favorite albums when I was growing up, and I still have a special place for it, is Beck's Sea Change, and it's an album that Beck wrote when like ending like a 9-year marriage or a relationship, and it's like it's a pretty sad album, but it's, you know, Beck was known for these like really computer and like dance songs, and this is like a really stripped down album, and it's probably my favorite by him. Yeah. So I also was really shocked that Taylor Swift would go this direction, and really enjoyed both albums from top to bottom.
Do you have a preference between the two? Because I feel like everybody has a strong take on this.
Oh, I think Folklore is definitely the better album, and Evermore is just like the B-sides.
Okay, fair enough. And Caitlin feels similarly for sure. I think they're both good. I mean, they both have songs that I like to listen to, you know, and I wouldn't say that like I'd listen to the whole album. I just kind of have the songs that I like from all of them and mix them up. But for Folklore, I think there's probably better choices, but I did do the thing on this one, which was kind of pick a song and just go with that. And really, one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs in general is "Last Great American Dynasty." I just think it tells a really interesting story, and musically, it's just interesting to me.
I think that's the one that she name drops Rhode Island. So
she does, yeah. Well, it's all about her, like the house that she bought
yeah.
in Rhode Island. So the movie I associate with it is The Magnificent Ambersons, which is the Orson Welles movie from that he made right after Citizen Kane, which kind of infamously was butchered by the studio and kind of took years and years and years for people to see what the director's cut was supposed to look like. It's set in this period that the song is, or at least part of the song is, where kind of like late 1800s America, and there's these, they're talking about the heir to the Standard Oil, and this Magnificent Ambersons is one of these like old rich families. I think the movie takes place in like the Midwest, like St. Louis or something. And this movie is all about vehicles and like, some people, should we invest in these weird motorized carriages, or are they just a fad? And a family that kind of gets ruined around making bad choices, not just in that respect, but also, romantically and personally as well. So I just kind of thought about that song and this idea of a dynasty in America at that period of time, and thought that it was an interesting connection, even though most of folklore is probably outside of that type of world.
Yeah, I could see that kind of connection with that. And I also went for like a stripped down kind of like Into the Woods idea, which for me, I wanted to go with like a movie that I really enjoyed, but may have like a lower profile these days, and especially when it came out, which was this movie called Leave No Trace.
Yeah.
It came out a bunch of years ago. It has Ben Foster and Thomasin McKenzie in it, and it's really, what you first learn is it's about this father and his daughter kind of like living deep in the woods and just kind of like surviving off the land and making their lives out there. And you eventually learn what led them to live that life. But I think like that's the kind of vibe I get, is this like stripped down kind of like let's start at the beginning type vibe from the album.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great choice for folklore. And then for Evermore, I mean, kind of similar vibes. You called it the B-sides. I think that's fair. I think that, some of the songs I would put on the A side, but that's just the way it goes. I thought about this song, and I guess you could say, this album and folklore too, to an extent, as like telling a lot more stories about kind of characters, and also kind of making observations about maybe people that she knew that were different than a lot of what we heard previously. But I kind of took that and I went with Little Women, and I guess you can pick your version of it. But just, Joe being the writer, and telling stories, some fictional and some real life. And I think, kind of the vibes of that setting, fit, even though like that's in the past, and, I don't know where folklore and Evermore are supposed to take place, presumably the present, but I just think that like, kind of a little bit more stripped down, a little bit less, big city, cell phones, technology, etc. So I kind of thought that kind of worked.
Yeah. For me, I kept to the idea of it being B-side, so you want to get to the same kind of like atmosphere.
Yeah.
And certainly when Taylor Swift's big production of Willow from Evermore came out, she had like this almost like witch magic theme.
Yeah.
And for me, I just took that literally and went with the witch.
Okay.
And,
cool.
And think like that's the Anya Taylor-Joy movie. directed by Robert Eggers, that came out from A24 a bunch of years ago. And I just feel like, in a way, that's also like a female empowerment movie, and something that Taylor would probably dig, because like, you know, even though a lot of horrors go on, it's also like, come do this and we'll accept you for who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting choice. You ended up with 2 movies from my 2016 top 10 list. So if you're going with, you know, what? Well, I had La La Land, which I think was the same year also. So that was on my list. Boy, we're just going right back 7 years ago for all these songs or albums. It's kind of funny. But okay, so well, just before we move on, thoughts on like how Folklore and Evermore played on the show?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like knowing those albums and thinking like how they came out, I would say like she would never be able to just tour like those 2 albums.
Not in big stadiums.
Right, it would just be like weird. Not like stadium songs. So like the only way that she could really like play them would be in this like big format like this. And you know, you got to hear them, and it was cool. I'm trying to think of some of the other songs from those albums. Like I think like she played like Mirror Ball or something like that. And
I don't remember if she did. I mean, I know she played Betty. That was a big, you know, kind of sing along moment.
Yeah.
She did Champagne Problems. That was a big moment also.
When Tears Ricochet, is that?
Yeah.
The one she may have done.
Marjorie.
Yep. She said like that was dedicated to her grandmother.
Yep. So, she gave them these albums as much time as the other ones. She spaced them out well. I felt like she goes from Evermore right into Reputation, which was probably a good choice to kind of just pick up the energy, and then Folklore into 1989, which was, you know, a big energetic and, you know, everybody wants to sing along to the songs they know kind of transition. I know for Folklore, which, you know, I know you like more, I'm kind of neutral into both of them, but Evermore was early enough in the show where I was still good to go, and we were on the floor, so we were on our feet the whole time. Folklore, there was a couple songs where it was just like, I have to sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those were the first and I think maybe only moments where I sat down was 1 or 2 of the Folklore songs. But at that point, it's just I was really starting to get tired. But yeah, no, I thought that was good. I thought, you know, that there's so much production happening that, you know, they can kind of keep some of these slower songs and more gentle songs, I guess.
And your venue was a dome, right, or at least inside?
No, it's not. It's outdoors. There's no dome in Philly.
Oh, good, because like it was very loud at Gillette, even because we have an open stadium. And I'm like, I don't know how it would be in a closed stadium.
Oh, it'd be brutal. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we had we wore earplugs, so it was.
Oh yes, I forgot mine in the car.
Oh,
and I was
fun.
Like,
yeah, there was a few moments where she's just speaking and I took them out, but then she says something that makes everybody scream, and I was just like, holy shit. It was something. But that takes us to Midnights, which is the most recent album. Came out last fall. And where did you go with this one?
I decided to like embrace like kind of the craziness of it, because it kind of goes all over the place, and I think I'm liking it more as I listen to it more. I definitely kind of like rejected it right away when I first listened to it. There was like, oh, I was like, this is how she follows up Evermore and Folklore, and it didn't really excite me. But yeah, I also wanted to reference a movie that I saw recently, and Criterion's releasing again soon, which is Martin Scorsese's After Hours.
Oh, okay,
yeah, I thought like this idea of midnight and hours and things like that, and that movie is just absolutely crazy, where the lead is like just experiencing life in the after hours of the evening, and just craziness. And I thought that was a really great movie, and I think like it kind of goes with the flow of the album. But I think like as far as like what I like on the album, I do like Karma. I don't know if I like the new Ice Spice remix, but I like Karma, and Lavender Haze
Yeah,
is growing on me.
yeah.
Maroon maybe, but I thought Vigilante shit is ridiculous, and
Oh, I love that song. I think it's
uh,
great.
I, no, I think it's ridiculous.
Fair enough. Like Bejeweled.
Yeah, that's
Um,
okay. It's just that one's kind of forgettable for me.
okay. So cool. That makes sense. I've never seen After Hours, but I'm looking forward to the Criterion coming out. Um, so I went with a favorite of yours, which is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And I think that it's a little bit projecting because I think that, the story is still out there as to like exactly what happened with her and Joe Alwyn and like how much of this song, certainly she just released a new song from that, I guess that wasn't on the album, but is associated with the album. I'm not really sure how these things work, but have you heard You're Losing Me?
I thought like there was something else, like Nothing Better or something like that, or it's the
She
name of the
wrote
song.
about
But
it's a new song that she just put out,
yeah,
and like it's pretty like explicitly about him, and she has lines like, yeah, I wouldn't marry me either, and it's kind of just about like that, the end of that relationship. And I think that like there's other songs that kind of reference like a little bit more of like a more, heartbreak, I guess you can say, but just like, breakup-y vibes. I think Lavender Haze has a little bit of that, where you want to stay in the lavender haze and not see what's actually happening around you. And so I think that there's like a mix of like really good memories and really bad memories in this album, which is sort of what Eternal Sunshine is what's happening there in Jim Carrey's, mind and memory. And I think that just the songs themselves talk a lot about memories and dreams and things like that, which made me think of that. So you have the lavender haze that I mentioned, and kind of like a little bit psychedelic imagery, which you get in this movie. Also, she talks in Anti-Hero about the dream of my daughter-in-law killing me for the money, and just like all these kind of like out there images that she references a lot in these songs, which I felt like made me think of this kind of this movie, and just the mixing of kind of sorrow and joy that I feel like is present in that movie also.
well, whenever you recommend that movie to somebody to watch is an A+ to me. So.
Yeah, I figured you wouldn't object too much to that. So okay, so those are some of our movie era connections. I'm assuming that some of the people who normally listen to us are not going to be able to follow what we just did. Maybe there's some people listening who don't normally listen but are interested in some Taylor Swift stuff. If you told me we were going to talk about this 2 months ago, I would have guessed that for some reason I was no longer a host of the pod and that you recruited my wife to replace me, or yours. But I enjoyed this a lot. Thank you for participating.
John, do you have a favorite or a top
Okay, yeah.
three?
So that was the last thing I wanted to do, was we were going to do some album talk. So,
Yeah.
gosh, it's really hard because like I listened to a lot of these for the first time, like a month ago. I don't know that I could like properly rank all of them. I will say that like the ones that I feel like I've kind of gravitated to the most are Folklore, Evermore, and Lover. Um, but I think, Red has a lot of songs I really like, even some of the ones that she didn't play at the concert. Like Red itself, I think, is a really good song, and I like Holy Ground a lot. So I think that has a lot going for it as well. And then, 1989 has a lot of songs that I can appreciate, even though they feel a bit played out in my mind. So I guess those are the ones that like I've enjoyed the most over the last month and a half, since I knew I was going to the show and figured I should brush up on some Taylor Swift. But definitely not the long lasting relationship that you have with, I think, any of them. So what are you going to hit me with here?
Yeah, I think like Speak Now is up there for me. I really like Folklore. Red is very good. Fearless. And then like probably like the next tier is probably like 1989 and Evermore.
Mm-hmm.
like Lover and Reputation are kind of like okay. Midnight's is less okay. No, maybe like even I might like Midnight's more than Reputation now. I don't know.
Midnight's is growing for you.
Yeah, I just never listened to the debut album.
Yeah. So when you think Tim McGraw, what do you think?
Not listening.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, cool. Well, this was fun. So hope you enjoyed listening to it. We're going to do a quick what we've been watching. But before we do that, we'll let you know how you can follow us. The podcast is on Twitter at It's the Pick Pod. And Max, you're at
MH Colville.
You can also send us an email at itsthepictures@gmail.com. Let us know what city you saw Taylor Swift in and what movie connections you make with her albums, I guess. I know she's getting into filmmaking, so like, maybe we'll be able to connect one of these albums to one of her movies.
I mean, the movies that she's appeared in aren't really good. I think it's
no, they're not.
Is it like Amsterdam and like?
Oh, is she in that? I don't remember that. No, but she's in like some old rom-coms too, like Valentine's Day, I think.
No, because of the new David O. Russell.
I didn't know she was in that. I didn't know.
Yeah, she gets hit by a car. You should like watch the video. It's ridiculous.
Okay, I somehow skipped that one. Like 99.99999% of people on Earth. And it sounds like we're the lucky ones. But nevertheless, I guess I'll check the clip out. You can also check us out on Letterboxd at It's the Pictures to see what we've been watching lately and keep up with our various lists. And Max has the newsletter at itsthepictures.substack.com. What have you been writing about of late?
Last month I did a little bit of a continuation of our Disney show. I did a top 10 favorite Disney songs. I think I'm gonna continue doing more Disney stuff on the newsletter that you can look forward to. Some more reviews coming out soon, and maybe some thoughts going into our next podcast. John and I have already started talking about maybe doing the Indiana Jones series. So
I'm looking forward to that.
Maybe some thoughts on that.
Cool. And finally, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or any other podcatching app. While you're there, please leave us a review. 5 stars will help other people discover and enjoy the show. The only thing I've watched lately, I mentioned as we did the last segment, was 10 Things I Hate About You. Otherwise, it's been a lot of TV, Succession ending, Top Chef.
Yes, ending. we needed to talk about Succession.
Are we allowed to do that like properly?
Yeah, it's like been weeks.
Okay, well, 2, I think. I don't know. I thought it was great. I loved the show. I loved the ending. I thought it was perfectly appropriate. I had almost no notes, I'd say. I don't know. What was your impression?
You believe that it had to end poorly for everybody, right? 'Cause they couldn't.
Yeah, and I think it did end poorly for everybody, including our new CEO.
No, he's fine.
Oh, I mean, he's fine. Like, he got what he wanted, but that's not going to make him happy.
Maybe he's always like I think he always tried to do power moves.
Yeah, I know, but that doesn't mean he's going to be happy now that he's gotten this. Like, I mean, he's going to know that the only reason he got it is because his boss wants to fuck his wife. And like how, it's like, okay, like he'll make that Faustian bargain, but like it's not going to make him happy. He's not going to be happy in his relationship. I don't know. I think that like the idea that he could be happy in that specific role is something that he'll kind of chase for the rest of his life until he's bitter and old.
Do you think Jerry made out well? She's gonna get a nice settlement.
Yeah, I mean, Carl, all those people, like they're fine. Like, whatever happens to them, like, but they were not the ones whose happiness or kind of eternal unhappiness we were wrapped up with. Like, that was the kids, and I think Tom, you want to probably group into that bunch. What
about Connor? You think Connor's going to be happy?
I think Connor made out just fine. I think he did okay. He's going to Slovenia. Willow's got the house and the couch that she's importing, and but he was in some ways he was the only smart one, where he was just like, I'm not going to chase this thing because I know it's never going to be what I want it to be, or whether he ever had that choice or not, I guess is debatable because we don't know much of his backstory. But I think that like he definitely is the happiest one of the three main kids of the four, I guess, kids.
Do you feel like there was enough closure? I know like the most famous thing that HBO is known for is probably the ending of Sopranos and how that didn't provide closure for people. And I know that this ending of Succession, it kind of ends like almost in media res, because you could theoretically continue the story. There's a lot of juice there, but they decided to end it on the ultimate what would happen in the race for succession.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. Like, it ends with these kids and their relationship to this company outside of Shiv, as, you know, kind of it being through marriage, which feels appropriate because she ended up being this thing that she never really wanted to be, which is the wife
Her
of
mother.
CEO. Yeah, right, exactly. I think that the closure was right. I mean, I think that, you know, we see Roman having a drink, and whether he's going to fall into alcoholism or the drink is meant to be some sort of like, you know, nod to him being happy to be out is, I think, debatable. Shiv, we saw, you know, I think a lot of people clung on to Shiv and the non-handhold, right? As like, okay, what is this? But I don't think it was anything. I think it was just like, I'm stuck with this person, and, you know, I'm not going to be happy about it, but here I am. And then Kendall is just kind of, you know,
and it's funny too because
person.
yeah, it's funny too because when you know the result of this and that they ultimately sell the company, these people aren't going to be poor.
Yeah. No, they made like millions and millions and millions.
Yes, by selling the company, they're going to be very well off. They're going to have more money than what they had before.
They could do whatever they want.
It was all tied up.
But it was
in, like,
never
fantasy.
about that. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with all of that. So I felt like there was enough closure. You know, it's hard to imagine that like they'd ever be able to like, at least Shiv and Kendall would ever be able to like reconcile after that.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how you would reintroduce them as brother and sister. So I feel like it probably was fine to kind of wrap there, and they'll live their separate lives to an extent.
Yeah.
Good show.
Great show. And, you know, it wouldn't have been possible without writers. And
yeah, they're good. They're good folks.
Yeah, we fully support the Writers Guild strike going on.
Yeah, for sure, especially with the IP monstrosity that we talked about earlier. But I guess speaking of IP, and you know, not all of it is bad, right? You saw Spider-Man. What is it called? Across the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, I think this one's Across the Spider-Verse. I think the first one's like Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay,
and I think the third one's going to be Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Okay. So tell us what you thought of this movie.
Yeah, so this one is a sequel to the Into the Spider-Verse. In this series, we're following Miles Morales as our Spider-Man. A young black kid who also lives in New York, and he is decidedly not Peter Parker. Following the events of the first movie, he met a lot of other Spider-Men, including a pretty normal Spider-Man from another multiverse, and also Gwen Stacy, also known as like Spider-Gwen in the comic book series. And he ends up like having feelings for her, misses her, and wondering if he's ever going to see her again at the beginning of this movie. But lo and behold, when they opened the portals, it led to a whole bunch of problems going on. And so now there's this spider coalition of Spider-Men from all over the world, galaxy, universes. I like saying the word Spider-Men, even though that's kind of silly. And they all work together to try to fix things and make sure the villains are in their right places, and that canon events happen the way they're supposed to. And if you're a comic book reader, that means very specific events like Uncle Ben needs to die, and to make things happen. And in a way, it's very much, or at least it reminded me. I didn't see too many reviews of the movie, but I imagine other people felt that way of Matrix Reloaded. And this idea of like, oh, you are supposed to live a very specific life, and these very specific events are supposed to happen. If it's not Uncle Ben, it's your other uncle, which is in the first Spider-Verse movie, Miles Morales' uncle dies after being a villain, and
Right.
that is very much what sets him on his path. And so when Miles Morales discovers that he has a very specific function to follow, he kind of rebels against it and wants to say, this may happen to everybody else, but it's not going to happen to me. And that's kind of what fuels the second half of this movie before it ultimately wraps up at a big cliffhanger, like
Nice.
Reloaded, and says, come see the second half of the movie next year. A lot of movies have been doing this two-parter thing, most notably Dune, even though that movie was always needing two movies because that's a monster book.
Yeah.
I think like the subtitle for this one was always part one.
Yeah, right.
So they kind of dropped that later in the promotional materials. But I didn't forget.
No,
So
did I.
I think what was the problem with my first watch of this was that I kept on waiting for the shoe to drop of like when the cliffhanger is going to be.
Yeah.
And that kind of sucks when watching a movie.
Yeah, I think
to know
fair.
that the cliffhanger is going to come. I mean, like I kind of felt that way with the Lord of the Rings movies too, and we've talked quite a bit about the first two before we're going to talk about the third one later this year.
Yeah.
And how even though those movies do have like this idea of like cliffhangers and the story isn't over, they also feel very much like movies of a proper flow, right? A beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Like even though like Two Towers has the very difficult job of being the middle movie,
Right.
and it still feels like it has a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair.
And it's tough, right? Because it's just like, as much as I did enjoy this, and I think like the animation is phenomenal. I think it's certainly the movie to beat this year for best animated feature and what have you. I'm sure a lot of people are gonna champion it for the rest of the year. Yeah, I just feel like maybe when I watch it again, I'll really enjoy the movie for what it is, even with the cliffhanger at the end there. And John, I another thing is that I've listened to the soundtrack a lot, and
Nice.
I just really started enjoying the sounds that they made for that movie and the music behind it.
Cool. Well, that sounds good. I really like the first movie. So I intend to see this one, and
And you'll be happy to know, John, that I read maybe yesterday or today that in 12 days it's already surpassed the entire domestic gross of the first one.
Music to my ears.
So,
I knew you could do a Spider-Verse.
Yeah, so whereas the first one was this like undercover, like, oh yeah, even though they made an animated Spider-Man, guess what? It was really good, and
Yeah,
it's worth seeing.
that one came out at like before Christmas.
Yeah, right around Christmas time.
So it's kind of interesting that they, totally switched up the release date, but maybe they felt like, because that one did well enough and people understand a little bit more that it could handle the summer release. And I feel like animated movies and superhero movies do come out a little bit, more frequently in summertime than the holidays. So it kind of made sense. But yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, I'm glad people are enjoying it. And like I said, I really appreciate the first movie. So I think this one will scratch an itch. And it's not the only part one sequel that we're getting this summer with Dead Reckoning coming in July. So cool. So I think that's going to do it for us this week. And we thank you for listening. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Yep, bye.
Bye.